welcome to another Wednesdays with IGTB. This is IGTB's regular webinar series focused on transaction banking. My name's Mike Rayfield, and I'm Product Manager for Contextual Banking Experience, or CBX, IGTB's corporate-facing white label channel, which is deployed at many banks with its contemporary contextual UX, or, and very relevant to our discussion today, as a headless solution. Today, our topic focuses on the channel domain and discusses the way in which banks' digital relationships with their corporate clients is opening up. It's posed as a question: how on earth can banks differentiate in an open finance world? We have a huge number of audience members registered from around the world, and we have lots of great content to share. I'd like to welcome the members of a great panel to help us through the topic, so let me introduce them to you. I'm fortunate today to be joined by online, actually with me here, by Toby Mayaka, Head of Banking at Coalition Greenwich. Many of you will be familiar with Greenwich's highly respected research into what clients need. We're pleased to also be joined by Yuri Miznik, Chief Technology Officer at First Abu Dhabi Bank, the largest bank in the UAE, and a bank which recently selected IGTB's CBX composable experience, the headless version of our platform. Yuri has a truly international background covering both banking and technology, with senior stints at HSBC, NAB, CBA, as well as Microsoft and AWS. Also joined by Jose Navas Lopez, Global Banking Lead at Accenture. Jose has 20 years experience of leading large international transformations for different Tier 1 banks across Europe, America, and Asia, ensuring best practices are leveraged from each experience to the next. The agenda for today starts with Toby Mayaka, who will present the results of a recent survey or recent surveys carried out by Greenwich Coalition into the evolution of transaction banking operating models. Then I'll share very briefly some of our own research into what banks are actually demanding through the RFPs which we receive, after which we'll enjoy a discussion with our illustrious panel. There will be an opportunity for you in the audience to get involved, so before we begin, just a reminder that you can ask questions at any time through the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen, and we'll do our best to cover them in the final segment of the webinar. Also, a quick note to look out for our next Wednesdays with IGTB on October the 27th, called How to Turn ESG and the COVID Effect to Your Advantage in Trade Finance, with a panel including HSBC, Coriolis, Greenwich, and of course, IGTB. So without further delay, I'll hand over to Toby, who will open up the session for us with what he's found in his research into the future of corporate and transaction banking operating models and how it affects the bank's ability to differentiate. Toby.
Thank you very much, Mike, and thanks everyone for joining. First of all, I think I reflected on your question. I think it's a really good question because it entails a lot of interesting parts. So how on earth means it's not easy. How on earth can corporate banks differentiate? Differentiate is what I will be talking about most, because that's really key in an increasingly commoditized world in banking. And then obviously you already kind of have a little bit of a plot spoiler, as you say, in an open finance world. So if we talk about open finance, I think you're already alluding to the point that, you know, it is really a transformational journey that we are on from a much more kind of a closed environment with distinct platforms to an open environment where obviously the switching costs are much lower, and it has obviously triggers a lot more challenges, but also opportunities for others to enter the market. So let me start with answering the question, what can they do? So differentiation is key. And what we find is that client experience is the key differentiator in an increasingly commoditized environment. That has been true in the retail banking sphere already for quite a while, but I'm absolutely convinced that wholesale banking is now also in the same kind of realm of this. Within differentiation and the client experience, the client behavior is now changing towards digital capabilities. So user experience of digital platforms is a key driver for the overall client experience. So I think I'm just taking it down a little bit from client experience to user experience, and the weight of user experience in the increasingly commoditized and but also digitalized environment is key, really, as a key driver to really then differentiate. So let me lay the groundwork for today's discussion in just reminding ourselves, what are the forces that have pushed the wholesale banking industry into innovation drive. And so I think just to state the obvious, it's a combination of the fiscal stimulus that we've seen, a low interest rate environment. This, by the way, is already pre-COVID environment already. But then we've seen a lot of technological innovation, and also obviously now the COVID crisis has really been driving the rapid creation of future operating model changes. So using new data analytics capabilities and client segmentations techniques allow banks to be more nimble in their operating models. So if we then look at defining the characteristics of future corporate and transaction bank operating models, I think there are three main points. The first one is digitization and digitalization, being agile and nimble, and coming back to your question, being open. So let me elaborate a little bit on these points, because I think they are really key in defining the characteristics of the future corporate and transaction banking operating model. So digitization, we've seen that in the COVID crisis, this allowed, although it was obviously a terrible event, and we are still in the midst of it, I have to say, this crisis has swept away most hesitations among the corporate clients about using online tools. And we have seen the digitization here and there with some spikes of activity before the COVID crisis. But I think now this is a much more broader event in terms of digitization, because it has taken away a lot of questions whether it really is important or not, and also the users are much more interested and actually craving for further digitization. Number one. Number two is the agility. So using new data analytic capabilities and client segmentation techniques, banks are attempting to leave behind one-size-fits-all approaches in favor of nimble operating models. So what we mean with that is that I think that there is an ability also through these data analytic capabilities to segment the way to interact with clients. The first one is the operational versus the strategic tasks. So I think banks are much more mindful now to say, okay, I might have a lot of operational tasks that we going forward can still do online or not in person, whereas there might be some more strategic conversations and tasks that we have to do in person. That triggers, and we'll get to that in a bit, but that triggers a change in the staffing model as well. I think the other angle is the differentiation of the different degrees of importance of clients. So if you now have the differentiation in that way, you have to leave the one size fits all, and you will be allowed to also meet some other objective, which I haven't talked about, which is the cost pressure that banks have. So meeting some of the cost pressures by changing some of the way you interact with clients. We just this morning actually had another finding from our data that showed that actually the interaction with the bank has increased. So if you were to move back to in-person meetings, this actually, the frequency of those meetings cannot be sustained. So, and it's also much, with digital interaction, it can be also much more short-term and like 15-minute meetings, and they can be online and they can be much more on demand than a meeting where, and when you are there in person, you would have a 30-minute at least to be kind of a 30-minute meeting, and people don't want that anymore, especially if it comes to the operating side of things. And the last point is really the open way of operating. So we have seen that there's a transformation of the bank operating model from a closed system to an operating system, and we've seen obviously now with the applications with APIs and also software as a service, that there's a lot of elimination of switching costs that we now see, which obviously basically puts the operating model somewhat and the old advantages of large corporate banks on its head, because there is much more ability now to enter client relationships, and it is much more challenging to maintain them, which comes back to the first point that you have to maintain a very high client experience to maintain the relationship. So if we go to the evolution of the client service with automation in a little bit more detail, we've seen that the things like very mundane tasks and servicing in particular are more and more eliminated. And by the way, also the reduction of error is coming with it if you automate. You can ensure accurate routing, or you have to ensure accurate routing of information and requests, which again, if you automate, can also eliminate a lot of errors, and the ability to leverage data analytics for problem solving. So different aspects. The third one, the ability to leverage data analytics for problem solving, is more on the consultative part of the bank-firm relationship, whereas the other two are more on the, let's say, operational part of the bank-firm relationship. So as an outcome, we see substantial time savings. We see more client interaction actually rather than less. We see a productive resolution of requests, and we see a better talent retention as well, because top bankers do not want to push paper, but they want to be more the consultant and really drive value on that front than being an administrator with a lot of mundane tasks. So a lot of positives, but also a shift of the type of people you would need. So the shift in terms of on the back end, people who are more kind of caretakers of systems rather than people who have been on the service side in the past, and on the front line, much more I would say experienced and well-equipped consultative bankers that can really tackle the system. So it has a lot of challenges to find the right people in that way, but banks are obviously very quickly adopting. Now, if we go to the next page, we also want to look a little bit about look at corporate preferred model of engagement. So what we've seen during COVID is that phone calls and video calls have been really significantly increased. Obviously, face-to-face in some countries are still not possible at all. And we also see, as we see today, webinars and emails, but webinars are also different means of communication. What of this will remain and what will change? So we believe that phone calls and video calls will likely retain a high level of importance. But face-to-face will come back, but again, by looking at the sub-segmentation of the operating tasks and the consultative tasks. So really a lot of a change during COVID, and I think we have to congratulate the community that we've, I think, all adopted quite quickly to these changes. But I think the more important question is, how can you now adopt to the post-COVID environment where clients and also staff really have different expectations than in the past. Now let me just very briefly touch on the future of banking as we see it in more of a timeline. As we can see here on the y-axis, the enduring differentiation, which I mentioned in the beginning, is absolutely key. And there is kind of a pathway in terms of the digital transformation journey that clients and banks are on. I think we are actually, in most cases, actually past the addressing pain points pieces, although we still see in our client surveys that things like KYC are still real pain points and can be further simplified and addressed. But I think most banks are probably now approaching the meeting needs phase, where we see a lot of investment in the tools and technologies, automation of tailored insights for clients, and I'm sure you will discuss a lot of that in a second. And the question really is, how quickly can you really graduate into the third phase, which is what we call the client delight, new client values phase. And that phase really would be actually beyond just meeting needs, but with digital capabilities, be able to anticipate needs and also be more consultative and more kind of focused on the specific needs of clients, while managing the cost side of things, which is increasingly also a challenge because this whole commoditization, also low interest rates, the whole environment is not really changing dramatically, and I think people have understood that now. So let me close with just a few observations of what are the business implications in the new operating model. I think the first one is low switching costs, as we mentioned. The second one is optimized corporate banking lists, so that clients will probably have a better way of optimizing what do I get from which bank in the best possible way, which we would expect also will trigger some consolidation of the banking groups that corporates are using, which obviously then increases competition. The third point is a smaller role for bank products. And what we mean with that is that it's less the traditional banking products that will be key, but more kind of a merging or blurring between tech, product, and innovation to maintain the differentiating level. And the fourth point being the bigger role for tech prowess. And I'm sure we'll learn much more about that in a second. And what I already mentioned, shifts in staffing. So the back and middle office staffing will probably be very transformative. And so I think these are kind of some of the key points of the implications of this change. And I'm very curious now to kind of hear what Jose and Yuri in particular have to say when we go more into the tech side of this dimension.
Yeah, great. Okay, thanks, Toby. Yeah, we'll get to that in the panel session. So that's really good. A great way to start the session off. Thank you. We can see that clear differentiation is going to rely on banks being able to respond and adapt quite quickly. I'd like to follow on from that then and add into the picture some of the key areas and themes that we see at IGTB, drawn from the large number of RFPs we receive and respond to, which gives us a great indicator of where banks are actually looking to invest. I've summarized the findings into 4 key areas. Firstly, and one of the key foundations or enablers is technology. Then there's the all-important UX tier or UX layer, which is the face of the bank or a realization of the bank's identity. Data, of course, is critical, but more than that, we see a common aspiration to unlock the power of the data that the banks have. And lastly, around collaboration, perhaps aligning to a target state infrastructure, but now by design and not really by accident. So let's have a look at a few of the details there then. So as I mentioned, I think that most banks are aligning to what is a maturing model for the key characteristics of their digital infrastructure. Broadly, I think we can say this aligns to MACH principles, M-A-C-H, which is an acronym which stands for Microservices Enabled, API First, Cloud Native, and Headless. All of those characteristics combine to drive scalability and flexibility, but crucially, they also help a bank embrace change instead of avoiding or delaying change. We also see banks making clear decisions to remove complexity from core platforms and ensuring that functionality and capability are not confused with systems of record or accounting functions. Okay, moving on then to a really big one, which is UX. It's a really important area, and one again where technology and the MACH principles can help banks move away from a one-size-fits-all digital solution where banks struggle to align client segments and sectors to solutions and replace it with a much more personalized or persona-aware space. Of course, underlying services like payments, liquidity, etc., might be pretty standard across the industry, but it's the UX that can differentiate a bank. The key change here is that with the right choice of solution, a bank can now have the freedom to leverage the speed of a vendor-based solution while still owning the UX for themselves. They can choose how to realize that differentiation, to implement fast without a box UI, or go headless and detach the solution's stock UI and design, build, and own a bespoke experience. It's the H I mentioned in the MACH principles, headless. If the digital platform is truly API first, like CBX, it will enable the UI to be modified or even detached and completely replaced. This capability can deliver banks the option to continue to own and manage their own UX, maintaining their own autonomy and identity. A great digital experience, of course, can also understand and differentiate based on the characteristics of the user segment or even business sector. A great UX will have the effect of reducing friction and engaging the user, driving more business through digital channels and ultimately improving the bottom line. The next section is data. Now, of course, data is what drives the UX, it's what drives the channel and the channel experience. And moreover, the intelligent use of that data can make a huge difference, turning the presentation of facts and lists into something engaging, natural, and even insightful. Best digital solutions need to leverage the typically huge amount of data available to the banks. And if we combine that data with a strong understanding of the persona who's accessing the service, we can create an experience that more naturally matches how the user thinks, maybe even replacing rigid menu-based navigation with natural flows that combine relevant information and reflecting the context or the thinking and, of course, the needs of the user. Utilizing the available data is one of the best ways to add value and amplify a bank's products and services. Great UX really can create an environment to help corporate users make decisions, introducing alternative product solutions through cross-sell or upsell. And then lastly, collaboration. In the digital channel space, collaboration is the ability to seamlessly integrate with third-party partners in order to deliver quickly and leverage niche specialities. This could be in many areas like chat, monitoring, analytics, sales and marketing, content management. But the key is to acknowledge and accept that no single vendor can be the best at everything. So another requirement for the digital infrastructure is not to only technically support third-party integration, but to be designed based on an expectation that it will be required, or having a stack that is designed to accommodate that. Of course, use of third parties provides other benefits like choice, speed to market, transparent costing, and distributing risk profiles. I think the key takeaway from all of these characteristics that we see from the RFPs is that there's no longer a need for banks to make the build versus buy decision. You can probably and probably should do both. Okay, so you'll be relieved to know that's the end of the slides. And we've heard from both Toby, who's provided some great insight into macro view of digital marketplace, and some of our own observations from IGTB of how banks are actively responding already. But it's time we moved on to the panel discussion. And to help move things along, we have a few questions that we'd like to address. So let's get stuck in. First question really gets to the heart of today's webinar topic. So the question is, in an open finance world, which drives standardization in many ways, and where adopting a more open architecture becomes increasingly important, how can banks maintain their identity and even differentiate themselves? So Jose, let me bring you in here. What's your view?
Okay, so thank you very much. First thing, good afternoon to everybody. I'm very pleased to be here with all of you. I think Toby was making such a good helicopter view that some of the answers are kind of already there, no? So let's be. I think Toby, you were using the word secret sauce during your presentation, and I like this analogy with the kitchen, right? So I think I have a techno-functional profile, so let me speak in both directions. I think at the end, all these IT art services, all these IT capabilities, etc., are the ingredients, right? But if you are the cook, okay, and you want to be a good cook, you know, the secret is in the recipe. And I think if you are a banker, the recipe is basically, as more or less explained also by Toby, the recipe is in the customer experience, and the recipe is probably on the product catalog or the product offer you want to have associated to this customer experience you are keen to provide to your client, right? I think the rest is creating accelerations, is putting us in the competition, and is mandatory from an IT perspective. But oversimplifying the picture, I would say that customer experience, product catalog are the key parts of the secret sauce, and the other areas are more like commodities in order to get your target. That's my view. Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Jose. Thanks very much. So, Yuri, let me bring you in. Welcome to the webinar. Maybe I can ask you the same question then. How do you think banks can maintain their identity or even differentiate themselves?
I think what we're seeing is that we all start selling effectively the same products to the corporates, to the businesses, and while we compete in that space, the most interesting part and what's actually what our customers are looking for is us being adjusted and us being tuned to how they want to run their business, what experiences they want to have, what processes they have on their side implement, especially the large corporates, if you think about them, right? And when we're building this sort of traditional way, when we're building this sort of end-to-end box solutions where effectively one size fits all, with some minor customizations. I mean, it's always hard to take a box product and start sort of customizing the service. It's impossible to do it. So what we need to start offering, and what we as FIB are also sort of pursuing as a big strategy, is that sort of the two phases. One is we obviously want to offer the greatest digital experience as we can provide, which could be sort of tuned and adjusted to whatever use case. But the biggest thing for us is also adding API-driven connectivity, where we can actually directly integrate with the customer systems, with their robotics processes, with their automated solutions, and essentially they can run the business the way they want to run, using our services at the right time, at the right moment, which effectively gives us sort of this flexibility to be like a hand in their glove to sort of fit into their process, without necessarily creating 200,000 permutations of our UI and UX. So I think from my perspective, first of all, having great experience, absolutely. Data-driven, analytics-driven, absolutely, no discussion here, but also being able to provide ability to corporates to use us as they want to use us, not as we prescribe ourselves to them. That's the big thing.
Yeah, great. So it's really having the flexibility within the bank to adapt and make and to tailor the solution around the persona.
I would be a little careful with the word tailoring, because it slowly goes to customizations, it goes to complexity, which you want to avoid. And in this case, finding this right balance between offering them the right services, which they can combine, mix and match, without necessarily adding too much customization or tailoring on our side, that's sort of a super important balance.
Sure, and APIs are the key to that.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, cool. So moving on, Yuri, maybe I can stay with you for the next question, if I may. You previewed in a recent fireside chat that you published that you've just invested with us in your cash management capabilities. What were the compelling reasons that made you want to take that step?
Well, pretty much everything which Toby talks about and Jose talks about and you brought up in the story. So we first of all, we realized that the breadth of the solutions which we're going to offer to our customers pretty much will be a combinations of sort of best in class and best in breed banking capabilities and cash management and other capabilities which we want to get together. So in this case, finding a right sort of headless, I don't want to call it a back office, but headless core systems and headless business systems, which allow us, first of all, to combine experience together from a few solutions into one, one meaningful experience. That's very, very important. The second one, having a very well-defined, clear API layer, which we can offer our customers as an alternative. That's another big thing. And there are very few solutions on the market which offer that capability. So we were looking around, and so we decided to go with Intellect here, and that's sort of one of the big reasons. It's a long journey. We're definitely not expecting it to be nice and simple, but it's definitely strategically sort of right for us. Well, pretty much everything which Toby talks about and Jose talks about and you brought up in the story. So we first of all, we realized that the breadth of the solutions which we're going to offer to our customers pretty much will be a combinations of sort of best in class and best in breed banking capabilities and cash management and other capabilities which we want to get together. So in this case, finding a right sort of headless, I don't want to call it a back office, but headless core systems and headless business systems, which allow us, first of all, to combine experience together from a few solutions into one, one meaningful experience. That's very, very important. The second one, having a very well-defined, clear API layer, which we can offer our customers as an alternative. That's another big thing. And there are very few solutions on the market which offer that capability. So we were looking around, and so we decided to go with Intellect here, and that's sort of one of the big reasons. It's a long journey. We're definitely not expecting it to be nice and simple, but it's definitely strategically sort of right for us.
Yeah, sadly, digital's never that simple. So, Jose, let me turn to you again. Yuri's talked about headless and being able to present, I guess, what we might call an ecosystem of combined capabilities from different sources. And it's a topic we see many analysts and commentators referring to. How do Accenture see these ecosystems developing as we move forward?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I would like to link with the previous answer by Yuri, because first thing, I'm delighted to hear somebody like Yuri coming from the bank side, basically saying, careful with the meaning of tailoring, not customization necessarily, etc. And I think this is bang on. Yeah. So in the new ecosystem, when there are a lot of new players, yeah, in both the technology side, but also in the offering of banking services, I think the new tailoring is not the customization per se, but the right selection of the partners that are fitting better with your business view, right? What you want to get from this customer experience or from this product catalog that you want to offer. So the right selection of in the ecosystem of the options and partners that are going to help you for your target, okay, is the key part of this new tailoring, if you want, where maybe customizations are not so important. It's important that you have clear what you want to do, and it's important that you choose a few partners. Let's be clear, right? If we start to take a little bit of here, there, over there, etc., we will start to face integration problems as usual, etc. So a good selection of a few partners in the new ecosystem that are all together fitting for your purpose, I think is the key message here, in my opinion. And we are very used, for example, in Accenture, we are very used to that, right? One of the typical studies we are doing for the different banks is normally that, right? Like, okay, tell me your business requirements, and once your business requirements are clear, we can try to help you based on our knowledge on the market to understand what are the better partners you could go for based on our experience. So I think this is, I like this kind of leitmotif. So I really like the previous reply by Yuri. I think tailoring means now right selection rather than customization, something like that. Yeah.
So it's not just any partner; it has to be the right partner, and that.
Correct. This is exactly the point. And there is not one answer for all the clients, right? The right partner is normally very linked with the.
Yeah, so what's right for one might be different for another. Yeah,
and this is the way also to reinforce the comment about how you can personalize, okay, or be differential in this context where the utilities in many cases are common. No?
Okay.
Mike, if I want to jump in a little bit here, I'm looking at the question I think Sanjit is asking in terms of, every customer would have a little bit of a different ERPs and different back office systems. So how would you, everyone will require slightly different APIs for them. I think actually it's a very interesting comment, and it's coming to what Jose is talking about. And that's a philosophical question in a big way. We used to think that bank is obliged to customize a solution to fit every client in the world, especially if you're the large client. If you think about what it ends up, we end up with a huge amount of complexity, very, very high cost, very, very big regulatory burden, huge upgrade cycles, and all that mess which we can have with. If you think about what the big tech ecosystem is playing right now, and I like the word ecosystem because sort of it's a collection of platforms which use together. They especially, meaningful established platforms, they don't customize per customer. They offer capabilities. They offer capabilities in a very transparent and meaningful way, in a very good catalog. And then they give a customer's ability to essentially tune these capabilities into what matters to them and to plug them into their set of ERPs, back office systems, and whatever you choose. Because doing this with APIs is much easier. You are not playing with screens. You're not doing screen scraping. You're not doing integration. Modifying JSON, modifying the payloads, and maybe combining a couple of business calls into one and giving it back. It's much easier. It's possible. It's actually much more flexible. And all the other companies, all the large customers, medium customers work with, they've been doing this for ages anyway. So it's much easier for them to use capabilities of the platform and tune it and assemble them together, rather than us starting to tune, manipulate, customize for each client. I think that's the big tune, manipulate, customize for each client. I think that's the big shift.
Yeah. So
happening.
Yeah, so it's kind of almost like a mind shift for the banks to get out of kind of being a passenger to responding to clients and adopting a more contemporary model. Yeah, so yes. That's really, really interesting. So another question then, I guess I'll come back to you, Jose, if I can. Given the evolution towards flexible operating systems that Toby talked about, and the emergence of MAC principles that I mentioned earlier, microservices, API first, cloud native, headless, etc., and those being more broadly acknowledged in the marketplace. When we think about differentiation, can you suggest for our audience 2 specific actions that banks might want to consider taking over the next 3 to 6 months on that journey?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so not trying to repeat myself, but if I don't give the answer I'm going to give, I think people would think I'm not consistent. No? So I think you really need, first thing, to think on the way you want to have your relationships with the clients, and then based on that, you really need to define your customer experience. So that's first thing, definitively. And associated to that, obviously, you need to rethink on your product catalog and how you want to tailor it, using Yuri's comment before, in order to support this relationship you want to keep with your client. So customer experience, and as a second derivative, product catalog associated to that, I would say, is the two main actions to start with.
Okay. And Yuri, maybe your view on the same question.
I would absolutely support what Jose said, but I would also say you need to pick up the right technology foundation. So, and I'll probably go a little bit more technical here. And from my perspective, having a meaningful API platform is critical. Gateway, catalog, ability to have sandbox. So very few banks essentially built it in the right way, where you could easily sort of, not experiment is the wrong word, but you can easily integrate, play, try, see how it goes. So that's one big thing. I also from the technology side is, from my perspective, the only meaningful way for that to happen, and for everything which we talked about, so the experience, the big data, the data-driven transformation, the data-driven services to happen, is through the public cloud. So, and we have some areas in the region where it's more evolved. We have some countries, for example, in the Middle East, where we're still catching up. I'm very happy that UAE will have very soon both Amazon and Microsoft, for example, as a public cloud providers. I know Saudi Arabia is playing there. So cloud, with its agility, with its a set of platform capabilities which allow you to move much, much faster, I think is also very, very critical to enabler for, and sort of, if you, my advice is that for any banking, if you're not using it, if you're not thinking about what's your API platform story externally facing, what's your cloud strategy, how you're talking to, how you're actually doing it, that's two big things.
Yeah, great. So your comments on tech stack there, I know you said you were getting technical, trying to avoid it, but it kind of reflects your comments in your fireside chat about technology being one of the few real differentiators.
Actually, it is, and that's a great point. And look, we probably, I'm being a technologist, it's actually very easy for me to say, but realistically, it's probably one of the few differentiators which are left in the banking world. If you think about retail, I think that's actually the only differentiator, and ability for you to build the ecosystem and the platform. I think in the corporate banking services, we have a bit more levers to play with to compete, but I absolutely agree. Technology and talent probably together are the key differentiator in the space. We can add other bits like data and the platform and service, but they all come out of these big two things.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. That's really interesting stuff. Thanks very much, Yuri. So, Toby, let me bring you back in. Having heard what Yuri and Jose have had to say, before we get into the Q&A, any last words from you that dovetail us nicely back into the conclusions from your own research?
Yeah, thanks. Really fascinating. Just for me, my personal highlights, I think what Yuri said in terms of best client experience is actually created by embedding into client processes rather than the other way around. And let's not forget, the drive for customization is only asked by the client in order to make things work for them. So if they don't ask for customization for the sake of customization, right? If you can embed it in the right way, there's no need for that. But by the way, I'm not sure they want to pay for it to start with. So that's another question what we see, in a commoditized world. I think what Jose said was also fascinating in terms of the ecosystem, and that actually the careful selection of players and then the focus on the connectivity of those players is more important than the customization once again. So because also, it's also about client want stability. And if you do it on your own all the time and you customize to death, the one thing that will definitely not work is a very strong and stable system. So I think having an ecosystem with carefully selected players and then working on the connectivity of those players, which is now with technology much easier to do. And then also not forgetting part of the ecosystem is actually the corporate client as well. It's not outside of the ecosystem, it's part of the ecosystem, and therefore also selecting the right clients, which is what we see with our banking clients a lot, that they really are very selective in the clients they want to. It's kind of the secret sauce to make the client experience second to none, and at the same time keep the cost in control as well.
Great, thanks very much, Toby. And of course, thanks very much also to the rest of the panel. Some great insights there. Feels like a good place to leave the panel discussion and maybe open up for some Q&A. We've had some questions coming through the webinar link. I'm just going to pick one up here. Maybe Yuri, I'll come to you first on this one. Question is, what are the secondary, or what are any secondary implications for a bank when embracing these new principles we're talking about? Can we expect changes to org structure, way of working, or a relationship between tech and the business?
I think that's a great question. And absolutely, yes. I don't think it's a secondary, I think it's a primary implications. And we can talk the whole hour about that. One big thing which I would probably want to highlight is that quite funny. There is the Conway's law, right, which talks about the fact that the technology architecture typically reflects the organizational structure of the company the technology is built for, and the other way sort of also works. So if you have a traditional sort of multi-tier vertical, how to say, vertical functional hierarchical organization, it's very hard to build the platform and experiences which we've been talking about. So one big thing I think will be coming, and it's definitely is happening already, is that setting up different companies called different. I'm sure Accenture has some special name for it. Setting up value chains or setting up the product teams or with more journeys or whatever you want to use. I mean, everyone has a different name, but setting up cross-functional teams who jointly with the business, with the risk, with security, with compliance, with legal, with the customer experience team, with engineers, API designers, will drive together a set of capabilities. So theoretically, each item in this catalog, which Jose was talking about, needs to be owned by this sort of cross-functional team, driven in an agile, iterative manner, be very flexible, be very responsive to the market. So that requires quite a lot of change, not just in organizational way, an organizational structure of the banks, but also in the way the goals are set up, goals are measured, aligned, and driven. I think that's sort of the big thing I would mention.
Great. So basically, the org structure reflects the way you want to approach your development and how agile you can be. Great.
Mike, if I may add something to what Yuri is just saying. So I like clear examples. So everything that Yuri has been saying is very clear, but I would go even beyond. I will use an example from one of my very recent experience. All this is an agile world. This requires agility. You are not going to use the best of the new technical solutions if you are not agile. All the areas from a business and from a functional perspective need to be adapted. But I go even beyond. I was in a project where everything was working really well in agile way, is set on procurement. And then the procurement department of the bank. Then it's fantastic that we were able to go into production in 3 months with a total change in the business view, etc. But if we were needing an expert in a specific technology and the procurement time, it was 6 months, it's good for nothing. So it's a full change in the mentality, right, of the organization. I just like this kind of radical examples, if you allow me.
And I would also add to one other thing, which is actually a very deep topic. Again, we can talk for an hour about it, is a regulatory and legal environment. Because if we're thinking about ecosystems, if we're thinking about combination of partners to work with the banks, with third-party clients, at the moment, we as banks are massively constrained by the regulatory environment and the legislative framework of how we want to treat third parties, how fast, how much risk controls we have, and control assessments we have to put in this place. So definitely a big thing which needs to change is the ability for banks to be much more agile in interacting with different partners and organizations through these platforms without treating them as a traditional outsourcers or a traditional, third-party vendors.
Great, thanks, guys. Another question from the audience. So we've had one come in now from a bank's role perspective. How can you provide a corporate client multi-bank ecosystem to replicate their multi-bank ERP TMS ecosystem when large corporates may not want to share information they have with other banks?
Okay, all this is a process, and I think it's very linked also with a previous question, I think by Vikram about, no, I don't know if it was Vikram, yes, about how we convince in order to utilize the public cloud, etc. So I prefer to answer with a concept, no? So all this is a process, right? And we don't need to convince anybody, right? The necessities are coming, and when the necessities are coming because we are in the competition, then we are automatically moving forward, right? And this applies to the utilization of the public cloud. This applies, I think there was other question. I'm just trying with this to cover different questions together. For example, Nites was commenting if the corporate clients are the one pushing back to adopt new technologies, or if this is the competition. Again, we cannot separate it, no? So all the time it's the same thing. The necessity is created because the clients are aware of all the different options. The different options are coming because of the numerous new players that are in the ecosystem, and because of that, either you are agile and you move forward and you are open-minded for all these different concepts we are discussing, either you lose the battle. Yeah, and this applies to the public cloud, this applies to the new solutions, etc., etc., etc. Sorry, I was just trying to scan different questions to reply as many people as possible.
I want to add to sort of the question on the how the bank will provide a multi-bank ecosystem. I actually think the bank's role is not to provide multi-bank ecosystem. Bank's role is to be a player in the ecosystem. Exactly. And the corporates should be consuming this ecosystem the way they should fit. Exactly. And the more services I as a bank provide, the more they use me, and the more the bigger part of the ecosystem I'll represent potentially. That's right. But I don't want to sort of integrate other banks. Maybe at some point of time when open banking will start sort of emerging and we'll have much more sort of, I don't think this is the case. I actually think it's a job either of a corporate client or integrators will emerge, which will be an aggregators of the platforms and services, and there will be sort of intermediate layers between the banks and the corporates. Who knows?
Yeah.
Or at least is not a current necessity. That is what we are saying. So when we see how this is evolving, okay, we need to be ready to be agile. But I agree with you, Yuri. The necessity is not for the bank today. Yeah. I think.
So just one last question, guys. It kind of plays into the same kind of domain. It seems to be where a lot of the questions are coming from. It's about corporates and how they might consume those APIs that the banks expose. But so the question is, will direct-to-corporate APIs become the new sort of host-to-host that we saw 15, 20 years ago starting to emerge? Well, that was the new way corporates would operate. Is it realistic to think that the API consumption directly by corporates will replace host-to-host channels in some context?
Yes, I do think that the host-to-host essentially will transfer into the API ecosystem. I mean, you're seeing what's happening in sort of the traditional EDI world, where you've been having a lot of supply chain system working through EDIs. Now it's more, even Swift is moving towards APIs. Yep. Right. So yeah, I think it's inevitably happening. It's simpler. It's better to run, and with all the security enhancements you're currently doing on top of the sort of digital signature ecosystem, digital identity, you would be able to essentially add a lot of sort of proof of work, proof of non-repudiation, authentication elements to that, which allows you to be much more secure. So yeah, that's my take, but it might take a while.
Yeah. Okay.
It contributes also to being more agile and being more open, right? So I think if we we had these 3 points, and 2 of which were open and agile, and that's exactly what APIs are allowing, right?
That's great. Thank you very much, Toby. Sadly, I think that's all the questions we've got time for today. So I'd like to thank Dr. Toby Miaka, co-head of banking at Coalition Greenwich, Yuri Misnik, Chief Technology Officer at First Abu Dhabi Bank, and Jose Navas Lopez, Global Banking Lead at Accenture, for sharing their experience, insights and thoughts with us today. I think we can all agree it's been an engaging discussion with some great insight from the panel. I'd also like to thank the audience today for taking the time to listen and contribute to the discussion through the Q&A. Thank you. A recording of the webinar will be available on the IGTB website, www.igtb.com/Wednesdays, along with recordings of other sessions from the Wednesdays with IGTB series. As I mentioned, our next webinar will be on the topic of trade finance and is called How to Turn ESG and the COVID Effect to Your Advantage in Trade Finance. So please look out for that and get registered to secure a spot and avoid disappointment. That's it from us today. Thanks for listening.